So well friends, good morning to all of you. Now today is the last theme session. This session is about mapping learning outcome with question items or test items. For this we have invited Dr. Mrs. Ritula Thakur, who has done a lot of work in this area. Although she is in electrical engineering department, she is associate professor. She joined NITR Chandigarh in May 2006. She has done ME in electrical and PhD in electrical engineering, and she has got about 17 years of experience in teaching and 13 years of experience in research along with teaching. Her areas of specialization include power systems, electric drives, real-time modeling and simulation of power system, power quality, microgrid and smart grid, then sensors and instrumentation, PLC and SCADA, and so on. She has taught several subjects at both undergraduate and postgraduate level, including basic electrical engineering, generation of electrical power, electrical engineering material, microprocessor, in electrical energy utilization at undergraduate level, and at postgraduate level, that is Master of Engineering in Electrical Engineering. She has taught subjects like measurement sciences, industrial instrumentation, microprocessor and microcontroller based embedded systems, smart grid technology, IoT based industrial automation, and so on. Dr. Ritula Thakur has till date guided more than 70 master's level dissertation, and 10 students are still pursuing their master's degree, and she has also started guiding PhD student. She has to her credit more than 140 papers in national and international journals. So about 84 articles, papers she has got published in international journals. And as I said that she has done a lot of work because she was intensively involved in the NBA of ME in electrical engineering with specialization in industrial instrumentation and control. So she is the right person, and she will be taking up one or two examples for mapping learning outcomes with test items. So with these words, I welcome Dr. Ritula Thakur to this particular program. As I told you that there are about 180 participants of various disciplines. So there are two remote centers. One is Guru Tegh Bahadur Institute of Technology, Rajouri Garden, New Delhi, and second is Department of Chemistry, Mulana Engineering College, Mulana University. So now over to Dr. Ritula Thakur, please.
Thank you so much, Sunil Dutt sir. First of all, for giving me this opportunity to be here for your STC talking on this topic, and also for introducing me. So dear friends, as Sunil Dutt sir has already introduced, I'm Dr. Ritula Thakur. I'm working as Associate Professor in Electrical Engineering Department. And as sir has told you during the introduction part that although I'm a core electrical engineering person, but I had my share of getting to know these things on instructional objectives, mapping them with test items and all those things when we started our journey of NBA in 2014. So as we are teaching ME in instrumentation and control in our department, we had applied and we got also NBA in 2016. And again, this year we have again applied for NBA. Our team has already come here, and hopefully we'll be getting the NBA very soon. So this is a very interesting topic which Sunil Dutt sir has given to me, that how to map the instructional objectives with the test items. So let me just share my screen with you. Another thing is that I'll be more happy that if we are able to make this session more interactive, rather than I am just speaking, let us make it a dialogue rather than a monologue. Okay, so I would be very happy that you people participate, you people interact, ask me questions. Whenever you feel like, please feel free to interrupt me. So let me just share my PPT with you, and let me know that if you are able to see my screen. So please let me know, are you able to see my screen? Yes, can anyone tell me? Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, madam, it is visible.
but not in full speed.
So, in this topic, mapping instructional objectives with test items, I'm going to cover the following topics. That is, after attending today's session, you will be able to learn the Bloom's taxonomy. I'm sure that during this STC, you must have already got an idea about what is Bloom's taxonomy. But when we are writing the learning objectives, when we are aligning them with the test items, it is very important. So, just in order to have a basic, overview and about this, we will again go through this, how to write the learning outcomes, and how to describe the various steps in writing effective exam items, construct the test items that are aligned with the course learning objectives. And during my session, I will also be showing you one video, and after you see that video, we will be just discussing something. So please see that video very carefully. And at the end of the session, I'll keep some time for all of you, that because all of you must be teachers and you must be teaching some subjects. So I would request all of you to please keep your pen and notebook ready with you. So because in the end, I will give you some time to make these learning outcomes or learning objectives for your particular subject. And then if somebody can volunteer, we will be discussing the learning objectives and if possible the test items if they have made, and we will be discussing it, and I will be really happy if all of you participate in that. Okay. So firstly, let us understand what are the learning objectives. What do you mean by learning objectives? If you remember in my previous slide, what did I say? After attending today's lecture, you will be able to. So I told you what all you will be able to understand after attending my today's lecture. So these are the learning objectives of my today's class, right? So first of all, it's very important that we should know how to write these learning objectives, because it's very important. So firstly, let us understand what are learning objectives. Sometimes we also call them as learning outcomes. So basically, according to the definition, student learning outcome or objectives are the knowledge, skill, attitude, and values that the students gain from a learning experience. You all are attending this STC. So you have some objectives, learning outcomes which you will gain after attending this STC. Similarly, for this particular lecture, there are certain objectives which I have kept in mind, that after attending my today's class, my participants will be able to gain this knowledge. They will be able to gain this skill. So these are nothing but the learning outcomes or objectives. So we can say that these learning outcomes or objectives define what the students already know, what they are able to do, and the value by the end of a learning experience. So how should our learning outcomes be? Our learning outcomes should be SMART. What do we mean by SMART? This means they should be specific, they should be measurable, they should be attainable, they should be result oriented, they should be time bound. Okay, now before we move further, can I ask you that when we say you should have an aim and these are some objectives, so can anyone tell me what is the difference between an aim and an objective? Can any participant tell me what is the main difference between aim and objective? Let me go back. Yes, can anyone tell me? So as I said that I want this lecture to be more of a dialogue rather than a monologue. Yes, Mr. Yogesh Kumar, you have raised your hand. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, very good morning. Sorry, good morning only. Ma'am, I think aim is something which is a broader term.
Yes.
Whereas objective is something which makes it like a very specific to the components of the aim. What I believe.
You're very right. Very close. Right. Thank you so much for your answer. Yes.
One more thing I would like to inquire, ma'am.
Yes.
There are two terms we are using, like learning objectives and the instructional objectives.
They are interchangeable.
So
You
are
can
they
call them
both
learning
same?
objectives, you can call them learning outcomes, you can call them instructional objectives, instructional outcomes. They are interchangeable.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Dr. Rupali.
Yes, ma'am. I want to add to this something like to achieve an aim, you need to have fulfill. You need to have to fulfill the objectives. You have to make
Very
certain
right.
objectives to reach an aim. So aim
Very
is,
right.
yes, broader, and objectives are the you can say stepping
Stepping
stone
stone.
towards your aim.
Perfect. That's very right. We've got some answers in the chat box also. We can read them. So Mr. Akshay Kumar is saying objective is short-term goal, aim is long-term goal. Okay. And Damanpreet Kaur ma'am is saying aim is the purpose and objective is the achievement. Okay. Okay, let us now watch this video, and I'm sure that after watching this video, many of the things will be very clear to you. So please watch this video very carefully. And let me know if you're able to listen to the sound or not.
In this lesson, you will learn the basics of writing aims and
Are you able to hear the sound?
Yes, ma'am.
objectives.
Yes, ma'am.
Teacher trainer. So in your lesson, you're going to have at least one student. And I want you to imagine that getting to the end of your lesson is like crossing a big river. The end of your lesson, the other side, is the goal.
Ritula ji, there is no video, only audio is coming.
Ma'am, Ritula ma'am.
No video?
There is no video, only audio.
Okay, okay. Let me just share the tab again. Now, is it there?
Imagine that getting to the end.
Are you able to see the video now?
Now it is okay. Now it's okay.
Okay.
The end of your lesson, the other side, is the goal. This is what you hope the students will have learned by the end. This goal is called the aim. In order for the students to reach the goal, they will need stepping stones to get across the river. These stepping stones are called the objectives. So what are aims and objectives? Well, an aim is a broad idea of what you hope to achieve by the end of the lesson. And the objectives are the steps students will take to achieve the aim. One of the most important things about writing objectives is that they must be measurable. We will be looking at this later. So let's have a look at an example. If we're doing a lesson on the human bones, you might set your aim to be to know the bones of the human body. This is not very specific and needs breaking into manageable chunks. Remember, an aim is only a broad outline. So our first objective could be to identify at least 3 different bones. This is much more specific and is the first stepping stone of the lesson. Seeing as how we are writing these specific objectives, you might ask, do we really need an aim? The answer is yes. Without an aim, you have no direction for your objectives. Therefore, you should decide on the aim of your lesson before writing the objectives. So now you might be wondering how important objectives are. Well, objectives are the most important part of lesson planning. They help to keep the lesson on track and also make sure that learning is broken down for the students. Objectives are written on both the scheme of work and the lesson plan. Objectives also help to keep your students happy. Not knowing what to expect from a lesson can make students lose interest. Students can easily switch off if they feel there is no plan to the lesson. Showing the objectives to the students lets them know what they will be learning, and this puts them at ease. It is very important to get your objectives right. The objectives need to be something that you understand and is useful to you. But it also needs to be something that another teacher could understand if they're going to cover your lesson. But don't forget, we're going to be showing these to our students. If the language is too complicated, they could get very confused. Therefore, they also need to be something that the students can understand. And so you may even need to reword them before putting them on the board for your students. In order to make sure our learning objectives are going to work, we need to do a smart test on them. You basically need to check that your objectives are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-related. So let's look at making a specific objective. If our aim is to learn about trees, we might write an objective which says students will do a test. Do a test is not specific, and another tutor covering your lesson wouldn't know what the test was supposed to be about. It is also something students will do, not what they will be learning. It is important that your objectives deal with learning. So we could change this to students will describe the process involved in photosynthesis. This is much clearer and also shows what you expect the student to learn. It is extremely important that your objectives are measurable. This means that you can actually carry out some form of assessment to check that your objectives have been met. If your aim was to learn about money, you might write the objective students will understand why we have money. But we have no way to test whether a student has understood something. You could ask them, and even though they say they haven't. So we could change this to students will give at least one reason for money. This is measured by default, as each student will give a reason, and you can check that it is correct. Next, we need to make our objectives achievable. If we were trying to teach students how to write an essay, we could say that students will write a 3,000-word essay. This definitely would help them to learn how to write an essay, but it's like climbing a mountain in one go. Mountain climbers always plan their ascent in stages, so we need to plan the writing of the essay in stages as well. So instead of saying write 3,000 words, we could get the students to write a paragraph of an essay. Now we need to make sure our objectives are relevant. If we are trying to teach students how to fix a car radiator, we might say students will learn how to change brake fluid. Even though this is related to fixing a car, it has nothing to do with the radiator and so is irrelevant. So instead, we could say that students will learn how to safely fill the radiator with water. Finally, we need to make sure our objectives are time-related. We do this by saying, by the end of the session, students will. Most of the exact timings are dealt with in the lesson plan, and you will learn about this later in the course. So let's have a look at the type of words you should and shouldn't be using. Words like understand, know, feel, appreciate, show an awareness of, and students will learn are not good in objectives. This is because they are not measurable. If you take understand, for example, students would need to do something else to show that they have understood. It is that thing that they do that you need to be writing in your objectives. Therefore, you should be using words like define, demonstrate, identify, create, state, and list. Each of these are tangible things that you can get students to do and can be measured. So let's have a look at an example of an aim and objective from a theory lesson. Our aim might be to assess the best exercise for weight loss. When writing the objectives, you might find it helpful to write by the end of the session, all students will. You don't have to repeat it if you write it how it looks here, but this starts every single one of your objectives. Now our first objective is to get students to identify different cardio exercises. Can you see how we are asking some to do more than others? This is called differentiation. You'll be learning about this later in the course. Our next objective is to get them to decide which cardio exercise is better. You can see how we are gradually progressing towards the aim. Now let's look at the aim and objective for a practical lesson. Our aim is to begin a 30-second promotional video. Our first objective is to create a storyboard for the video. Then the students will film at least 2 of the scenes for the video. And finally, they need to import the footage and trim the start and end points. Notice how it doesn't say by the end of the session students will. This is the way to write objectives when you are more confident. So hopefully now you have a better understanding of how to write aims and objectives.
Okay, so I hope that by watching this video, now the things are more clear to you. And I think many of you have already answered the question that what is the difference between aim and learning objectives. So we can say that aim is the final destination and objectives are kind of stepping stone towards them. Aim is more matlab, broad. So from this video, have you understood that why learning objectives are so important and why do we need to have an aim before our class and why do we need to make these learning objectives? So as in the video they have shown you that our learning objectives should be smart, they should be more specific, they should be measurable, they should be achievable, they should be relevant and time oriented. Okay, now how to write these learning outcomes or objectives? Now it's very important. In order to understand this, we need to once again go through the Bloom's taxonomy. So Bloom's taxonomy, in 1956, Benjamin Bloom et al., they had defined the various levels of intellectual behavior which are important in the learning. Right from remembering, they have started, and this is a kind of ladder. After remembering, we need to understand, then apply, analyze, evaluate, and finally create. So according to the difficulty level, it is now increasing. So I'll just go through all this very quickly because you must already be aware of this Bloom's taxonomy, but we will be using these terms in our coming slides. So that's why I'm explaining them again. So remembering means, as you know, remember means, are you able to recall or remember the information? In order to understand, are you able to explain the ideas or the concepts? Apply means, can you use the information in any way? Analyze, can you distinguish between the different parts in order to analyze? Evaluate means, can you justify any decision in order to evaluate something? And finally, create means, are you able to create a new product?
Excuse me, ma'am. Your
Yeah,
PPT is not visible.
PPT is not visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let me just share it again. Is it visible now? Is it visible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you for telling. Okay, so now the question is, how can the Bloom's taxonomy help with the course design or writing the learning objectives? In fact, these will also help us in defining the test items also. You see, if you see this, remembering, understanding, so you have to understand it like that before you can understand a concept, you must remember it. Okay, then after this, applying and analyzing. So before, in order to apply a concept, you must first understand it. So the ladder is like this. Firstly, it has to remember, then understand. In order to apply, again, you must first understand. After that, there is analysis. So in order to evaluate a concept, you must have analyzed it. In order to create an accurate conclusion, you must have completed a thorough evaluation. So this is how the course design will be, we can say, created using the various Bloom's taxonomy. These are the various terms which are used in the various levels. For example, in knowledge, define, identify, etc. All these terms you need to use whenever you are writing your learning objectives. And in order to understand, these are the various terms: apply, analyze, evaluate, and finally create. So this is according to the level of difficulty, as I told you. Starting from knowledge, we finally arrive at create. Not necessarily that you will have to use all these terms in your learning objectives. It all depends upon your subject. For example, if it's a very basic subject, the students, they are studying a very basic subjects, maybe in that case, the learning objectives will have more of these terms. However, if it is more of a complex subject, in the sense more of analysis is required, the students are able to design something based on that. So maybe in that case, the subject learning objectives will be, or instructional objectives will be, containing more terms according to this ladder. So that is why I'm saying that not necessarily every subject will have all the terms. So it all depends upon your interpretation, like you have to understand the things and accordingly you have to write your learning objectives. Now, I've taken one example of one of our subject, measurement sciences and techniques, which is taught at our ME level. Now, this subject is very elementary. It is at very basic level. So that is why I have taken this example. One more subject I will be taking, which is a bit in which there is more of a, analysis is required. So that is why I have taken two examples here of two different subjects, so that you, by taking these examples, I will be telling you how to write the learning objectives, and so that you are also able to write the learning objectives of your subject. As in the last, we'll be keeping some time. I'll be giving you some time for your own subject. You can just take the time and accordingly you can write the learning objectives. Okay, so what I've done is that in order to understand the things, I have divided the various topics, the various chapters. Otherwise, all these course objectives and learning outcomes, they are summed up in the end. But I have told you how to write for each particular chapter in order to understand it. Okay, now you see, these are actually the course objectives and these are the learning outcomes. So again, we can say that here, these course objectives, these are more broad. So there are two terms. One is the course objectives and the other is the learning outcomes. So we can say that the course objectives are more broad and the learning outcomes, they are more specific. So from each course objective, you can have 2-3 different learning outcomes, we can say that. So for example, this is one of the chapter, introduction chapter, in which various topics are there: review of measurement and measuring systems, functional elements of a measuring system, error and uncertainty in measurement, statistical analysis of errors, loading effect, generalized impedance and stiffness, static and dynamic performance characteristics. So learning outcomes, you can make more learning outcomes out of these course objectives. So from this particular chapters, I have made 3 course objectives. For example, completion of this course will enable the students to understand the measurement system, classify and analyze various types of errors, interpret static and dynamic performance characteristics. So these are the 3 course objectives I have made out of this particular chapter. Accordingly, I have 3-4 chapters. So from each chapter, I have made some of the course objectives, which will then finally make the course objectives for the whole subject. So from these course objectives, again, we can make more specific learning outcomes. Now, what are these learning outcomes? Learning outcomes are basically why they are created, so that while you are creating your question paper or your assessment, from these learning outcomes, you will get some idea how to write your test item. So that's why I have written here these learning outcomes here. For example, for this course objective, it is understand the measurement system. However, from this measurement system, you can again have 2 further learning outcomes. For example, define a measurement system, explain the functional diagram of a measurement system using a suitable example. Okay, so now I can use these learning outcomes in order to make my test items. These are useful for me. Then again, the second course objective is classify and analyze various types of errors. Now from this particular course objective, again, I can make 2, it can be 2 or 3 more also, 2 or 3 learning outcomes. For example, name the various errors in a measurement system, statistically analyze the errors in measurement system. Similarly, the third course objective is interpret static and dynamic performance characteristics. Again, from this, we have 3 further learning outcomes: state the loading effect and its types, define generalized impedance and stiffness, identify the static and dynamic performance characteristics of a measurement system. Now, why do we require these learning outcomes? As I said, that these will be helpful to you when you are making your test items or your question paper, and when you have to, as the title of our talk is, how to align the course objectives with the test items. So those course objectives, these learning outcomes are nothing but a part of these course objectives only. So because whenever you are writing some question directly, that may not be mapping with your instructional objectives or your course objectives. However, through these learning outcomes, it will be easier for you to map your test item or your question number with your course objectives. I hope this is clear to you. Similarly, the second chapter of this subject is the signal conditioning. Again, from this whole chapter, which is on signal conditioning, I'll not be going into technical details because it's a mixed audience, but I just want to give you an idea about how we should be writing these course objectives, and from them how we can make the learning outcomes. For example, from this whole chapter we can make one course objective, that is completion of this course will enable the students to, this is a common wording you have to write, that completion of this course will enable students to demonstrate various types of signal conditioning system. So this is one course objective. Now from this whole chapter or this course objective, we can have various learning outcomes which will help you in writing your test outcomes. For example, from here, if you see, firstly, we have this amplification. So we can write the learning outcome can be to define amplification and its significance in signal conditioning. Then we have these operational amplifiers, op-amps. So the learning outcome can be define various applications of op-amps, such as all these applications which are here given to you, they can come in this learning outcomes. Then we have these filters, low pass filters, high pass filters, band pass filters and all. So for that we have this learning outcome, explain various types of filters such as low pass RC filter, etc, etc. And then we have this sample and hold circuit. So from that it is becoming explain sample and hold circuit. Finally, analog to digital conversion, D to A conversion. We have this understand the concept of A to D conversion and digital to analog conversion. And finally, designing a signal conditioning circuit, designing a signal conditioning circuit. Now, please understand that when you are preparing your course objective or your instructional objectives or outcomes, you need not write, I mean, when you're preparing your curriculum, you need not write these learning outcomes there. These will not come there, but these are for your own understanding. Because when you are designing your curriculum, if you are a subject teacher, you will be also making learning outcomes side by side. It will be very helpful to you when you are writing, you are preparing your test items. Okay. But in your curriculum design, you will be making out these course objectives from each chapter. I hope this is clear to you. Similarly, this was the last chapter of this subject, measurement of non-electrical quantities, in which the various subtopics are review of conventional and recent measurement techniques for measurement of displacement, strain, pressure, temperature, flow level, humidity, etc. From this, the course outcome is that the student will be able to illustrate latest technique for measurement of non-electrical quantities, and the learning outcomes are from here: compare the conventional and recent measurement techniques for measurement, explain various methods for the measurement of displacement, strain, pressure, temperature, flow level, and humidity. So this is how we make our course objectives or course outcomes for a particular subject. Like, in order to explain to you, what I have done is I have broken my complete subject into different chapters, and from each chapter I have written the course outcomes. And for my own convenience, so that when I will be making my question paper, I have to map of my question paper questions with my course outcomes. What I've done is I have made some learning outcomes also from that particular CO. So this is a kind of CO. COs are for those who are undergoing your MBA process. You must be aware of these course outcomes. These are very important, how to write these course outcomes. And when you write your question paper, the CO mapping with the test items, this is very important. So you will be able to map these COs with your question paper if you have prepared these learning outcomes also along with your COs. Because from here, from these learning outcomes, you make your test items. So no, you know that these learning outcomes have come from this particular course outcome. So it will be easy for you. Okay, now coming to my second part, that is the test items. So because the topic for today's talk is how to align the course objectives or instruction objectives with the test items. So once we have understood what are the course outcomes and learning outcomes, now let us firstly understand how to write these test formats, and then we will align these test items with our course outcomes. So firstly, we have to understand that what are the types of these test items. So there are two types basically. One is the limited choice, the second is the open-ended. So in the limited choice, as the name implies, the students, they have to choose from the alternatives which have already been provided to them. They don't have much flexibility to formulate their own answers. For example, true and false, they either have to choose either true or false. So they have a limited choice. Similarly, multiple choice questions, they will be given, let's say, a set of 4 choices, and they have to choose only from those choices. Similarly, match the following. So they have defined limited choice. However, in the open-ended, the students, they formulate their own answer. For example, fill in the blanks, short answers, essays, problem solving, performance test items. So while preparing your question paper, you have to make a blend of limited choice and open-ended. Okay. Okay, now how to choose appropriate type of test items. For example, this also we will get to know from our learning objectives or our course outcomes. From our learning outcomes or objectives. So if you remember the subject which I had just taken as an example, now I am taking various learning objectives. For example, one of the learning objective was the student will be able to state or name the various errors in a measurement system. So here again, the most suitable test item will be limited choice. The student has a limited choice because the names of various errors are already defined, and the student has to name or state the various errors. So from the various verbs which are given in the learning objectives, you have to choose the most suitable test item. Similarly, if the learning objective is the student will be able to identify the static and dynamic performance characteristics of a measurement system. So you have the learning objectives with you. For these learning objectives, how will you decide which is the most suitable test item? What is the verb here? Identify. Again, identify means he has got a limited choice. So for this particular learning objective, it is better to give the student the test item which is of more of a limited choice, which we have just seen in the previous slide. Similarly, one of the learning objective is the student will explain the functional diagram of a measuring system using suitable example. So what is the verb here? It is explain. Explain means the suitable item will be most open-ended. Like, for example, it can be any of these. Student will describe various applications of op-amps. Again, it is open-ended because when he's describing, it is more of an open-ended test item which should be given. And demonstrate signal conditioning circuits using op-amps. Again, this is open-ended, means it comes in the performance test items. Okay, so now I hope that from this particular example of the subject which I have taken, now you are able to understand how to write the course objectives, how to write the learning objectives, then how to correlate that from this learning objectives I have to write. I have to give this particular type of test item. So how you will do is you will make it using this verbs of your learning objectives. Okay, now once we have identified from our learning objectives which is the most suitable test item, one must then decide which type of activity would effectively evaluate student learning. Writing a test item is a kind of, when you have to map it, you have to follow this kind of sequence. For example, now we have seen that for this learning objective, it is a limited choice. So most suitable type of activity will be fill in the blanks. Dash are the various errors in a measurement system. So that means the fill in the blanks is the most suitable. When we are saying the second type of learning objective student will be able to identify, so it will be more suitable in the limited choice will be match the following. For example, we have static characteristics, we have dynamic characteristics. On the right side, we can give them various options, and then student can do the matching, match the following. Similarly, the student will explain. So for this, the most suitable type of activity in open-ended will be how to write an essay. Student will be explaining through an essay. Then student will describe various. So it can be a form of short answer type of open-ended. And when we are saying demonstrate, so of course it is a practical, so performance type of activity will be there. Now, what are the various considerations which must be kept in mind when we are constructing the exams? One is the average time which is needed for test item time. This is also very important when you are making your question paper. I will give you one example in the coming slide. This also you have to specify. You know, when you are going through your NBA process, the NBA team, they see this whole, they take up their question paper, they see how you have mapped your test items, how you have given all these things. So average time also you have to keep in mind. So how you will decide that, for example, for a true false, the student may take only 30 seconds. For a multiple choice, let's say 1 minute. To short answer may take about 2 minutes. That's the following. For each response, it may be 30 seconds. Short essay may take about 10 to 15 minutes, etc., etc. So this also you have to keep in mind when you are framing your question paper. You should not be making it too lengthy. You should not be making it too short. So all these things you have to keep in mind. It shouldn't happen that in a 3 hours paper, the student is able to do a paper in, let's say, 1 hour itself, and then he's sitting idle. Similarly, it shouldn't happen that you have made it so lengthy that in the end, the student is not able to. It used to happen, you know. It used to happen that we used to say, "Mera to ye complete hi nahi ho paya. Last question, I could not attempt the last question." So that's where it's very important that when you are preparing your question paper, you should be keeping in your mind that whatever test item you are preparing, how much time a student will be taking. It shouldn't happen that you should be giving, let's say, 15 marks for just 1 true false type of item. So all these things also you have to keep in mind. Now I have taken one sample question paper. Let's say this is one sample question paper in which there are various parts, and this is the mapping which you have to do out of this. For example, the first question A part is explain the ultrasonic method for measurement of flow from the prospect of hydropower plant. So the topic covered in the course, I mean, this is how we prepare it. So the topic covered in the course handout is study of instrumentation scheme for hydro. Level of difficulty is, let's say, 1 to 4. In scale of 1 to 5, it's 4. Estimated time required is 12 to 14. And the CO mapped. So there are various COs which are there. So which CO is being mapped by this particular question is this particular CO. So how I'm able to map this CO? Because I had prepared the learning outcomes. From the learning outcomes, I have prepared my questions. So I know that this particular learning outcome comes from this particular CO. So accordingly, this particular part of the question, I'm able to map it with this particular CO. Similarly, this particular part, in fact, all these three are related to this particular CO. Similarly, second question was explain the working of pressurized water reactor in a nuclear power plant and compare it with boiler water reactor. So what is the topic which is covered in the course handout? Study of instrumentation scheme for nuclear power plant. And which is the CO which is being mapped with it? Apply the instrumentation scheme for nuclear power plant. Okay, so this is how you will be mapping your whole. I've just taken 2 questions in order to make you understand that how to map our topic of the test item with the instructional objective or the course objective. In terms of why I have used this word CO, because in terms of NBA, the course outcome is more frequently used. That's why I'm writing here COs. Similarly, this is the second subject by which I will tell you how to write your course objectives or COs. And this subject was more of a analytical subject. So that's why I've taken two examples here. So these are the various topics which are covered here. And these are the course outcomes which I have created out of this. Now you see, as I said, this subject was a bit of more skill oriented. It was more of analyzing, designing, so that applying. So in the Bloom's taxonomy, if you see, I have used the terms like analyze, explain, apply, develop the skills which are on more of a higher side of the Bloom's taxonomy. So as I said, it all depends upon you. You are the subject teacher. You know about your subject. If it is an elementary subject, more of the terms on the lower ladder of the Bloom's taxonomy will appear. If it's more of a analytical kind of subject in which more analysis is required, more designing is required, more application part is required, developing proficiency and skill is required. So accordingly, we will be using terms like these. And these are the various learning outcomes which I have prepared from these course outcomes. So from these learning outcomes, we will be preparing the test items. So now, in case you have any question, please feel free to ask me. Otherwise, I'll give you, let's say, 10 minutes. All of you, please take up your subject and prepare the course outcomes or learning outcomes of your subject. And if possible, I will request some of you to please volunteer, take up your subject, share your screen, and then all of us, not only me, others will also be pitching in the discussion, and we will be, just try to analyze the things. Okay, in case you have any questions, please free to ask me. Otherwise, we'll just start with your subject. Yes.
But should we mention prerequisites for the subject also in this?
Yeah, prerequisites for the subjects are definitely required when you are preparing your whole curriculum.
It should be mentioned with course objectives or learning outcomes, or
no, these are not mentioned along with the course objectives. When your contents are there, before the contents, you write your prerequisites. For example, in one of my subjects, I want them that basics of power system should be known to them. So those prerequisites I mentioned before the contents. After that, I make my objectives or course outcomes.
okay. Thank you.
Yes, does anyone have any other doubts? So now you can please start with your course objectives. Let's say you take some time, and after that, we will just discuss it. You can just share your screen after that. So can anyone just raise your hand, those who are willing to share their objectives after they have written it? We will be just discussing it in order to refine those. Okay. Okay, Dr. Ashish. And others also, in case you are interested, you can also volunteer.
Madam, we are at Nodal Center, so group of teachers will be presenting it.
Perfect, perfect. Okay. In the meanwhile, I'll just share my Bloom's taxonomy screen with all of you so that you can make your objectives from that. It will be easier for you. and please let me know once you have done. Mr. Shravna, can you please be more specific about your question? What are you trying to ask? I am not able to understand. What is the importance of electrical engineering? Course outcome is about electrical engineering. Okay, is anyone able to write? Has anyone completed the writing of the learning objectives, course outcomes? If yes, please raise your hand. If anyone has completed writing the course objectives or course outcomes, please raise your hand so that we can start discussing. Otherwise, how would I know you are writing? Sunil Dutt sir, are you there?
Hanji, Hanji.
Can you please ask the participants if they have done so that I know that they are doing or not? We can then start discussing on, because I had given them some time that they can take some 10 minutes, let's say, and after that we will discuss
Dear
it.
friends, kindly respond to Dr. Ritula Thakur.
Madam, only 2
Giving you
minutes.
a small
Okay,
task.
okay.
Madam, can we present?
Yes, sure. Let me just stop presenting. Yes, sir.
Is the screen visible, madam?
Yes, sir, it is visible.
We
Can you
are
please show the syllabus first?
syllabus, madam, we are not having. We have not prepared it on PPT.
Okay. Let us just discuss these course objectives. Yes, sir.
This is Foundations of Computer Science and First Wisdom for BTech Computer Science and Engineering.
Okay.
Course objective is to understand the concepts of sets, relations, functions, and discrete structures.
Mm-hmm.
Second is to introduce concepts of predicate logic. Third is to analyze difference relations. To relate practical examples, to use graph theory for
Okay. Okay, you have written.
outcomes is to understand sets, relations, and explain
Okay.
application of predicate logic to solve practical problems.
Mm-hmm.
Explain and solve recurrence relations. Demonstrate solution of real life problems using graphs and trees. We have also prepared this test items. What should be the test items? For first learning outcome, we feel that it should be limited choice. So we will be having fill in the blanks and matching type questions. For second, which is explain applications of predicate logic, that will be open-ended and performance-based. Explain and solve recurrence relation, that is again open-ended, which will be an essay type question. And demonstrate solution of real-world problems using graphs and trees, open-ended questions, and we feel that it should be short answer questions.
Sir, let us first come here. For example, in this case, in the second one, you have written explain application of predicate logic to solve practical problems.
Yes.
Although in this case, your aim is to solve practical problems, but what is the verb in this? Verb is explain, right? So when we are saying this, your learning outcome is explain application of predicate logic to solve practical problem. In that case, I think in the open-ended, it should be more of an essay or short answer type question. Similarly, in the last one, you have written demonstrate solution of real world problem using graphs and trees. So it's more of a demonstration. Here it will be performance.
Okay, madam, we will change.
And can you please come to your previous slide also where you had written your course objectives?
Yes.
These are the learning, the previous ones. Yes. To understand, to introduce, to analyze, to relate practical problems. Yeah, that's a good one you have made. You have made it a blend of understanding. You've started with understanding. To introduce the concepts of predicate logic. Which Bloom's taxonomy have you used here?
First Bloom's taxonomy we have used.
But in if you see this, the various terms which I had used, they don't use this term called introduce anywhere. So that is why we have to keep in consideration these Bloom's taxonomy. That's why I had displayed this particular slide to you. It is always advisable that you take terms from here. For example, you have written to introduce the concept of predicate logic. Of course, it will be your students will be introduced to this predicate logic, but I would say not to explain. Just go. Do you have that whole Bloom's taxonomy with you?
Right now, we are not having to demonstrate here.
Okay. Can you please stop presenting? I'll just display that screen to you.
Oh. Remember.
Remembering, understanding.
Yeah. Stop sharing. Stop sharing. There it is written. Stop sharing. Yeah. So you see, I'll just share my screen with you.
Okay.
These are the terms you should consider whenever you are writing your course objectives or your learning objectives. For example, if it is understand, you are, considering how the students will be understand, you should be using these frames. For example, one of your course outcome was to introduce something. I think it was there. So, what is it that the student should be able to? What is it that the student shall be able to infer? He will be able to explain. He will be able to illustrate. He will be able to describe or something. Are you understanding what I'm telling? For
Yes, ma'am.
example, in case your course objective relates to analyzing something, I think in your one of your course objectives you had written analyze or apply something. So you should be trying to use these terms, either apply, solve, change, relate, complete, use, sketch, teach, articulate, discover, transfer, contrast, connect, relate. The student will be able to relate, correlate, illustrate, conclude, categorize. I mean, these are some of the verbs which you should be. It is better that you use these terms when you're writing. Otherwise, it was fine.
Our group suggests that it should be illustrate now.
Yes. Okay. Okay.
Thank you for inputs, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much for presenting your work. So, is there anyone else who would like to discuss their instructional objectives with us? Is there anyone else? Please raise your hand.
Madam, we have one question also from
Yes,
Dr.
sir. Yes, sir. Please.
Madam, there are little bit doubts about the objective and outcomes. So we have to prepare course outcomes or course objectives.
Actually, sir, these two terms are mostly used interchangeable. Sometimes you may say course outcomes also, you may say course objectives also. It is one and the same thing.
Okay, it's fine.
In NBA terms, we call them as course outcomes. We call them CO mapping, PO. Okay, does anyone know what is the difference between CO and PO? Course outcome and program outcome.
I was about to.
Dr. Seema Singh, yes. Does anyone know the difference between course outcome and program outcome?
Program outcome and course outcome. PO is program outcome and CO is course outcome.
Yeah, then you're right. But what is the difference between CO and PO?
So I think program would be the entire VTech. If we are talking of a particular branch of learning, so we are talking of the entire VTech as a program.
Right.
And course would be with regards to the specific departments that we have, subjects that we have, computer science, IT, ECE, EEE, like that.
Very right. Very right. That's true. So, when you're talking about all these terms, especially those who are applying for NB, it is also very important to understand all these terms like course outcomes, program outcomes. For example, today we have talked about the course outcomes because we were talking about a particular subject. Course outcome means the outcomes of one subject. Like I took one subject, measurement sciences and techniques. So that subject has got some of after studying that subject, the student will be able to whatever. But that course is a part of my program ME in electrical engineering with specialization in instrumentation and control. So after 2 years of ME, what are the outcomes of that ME? They will be called as program outcomes. So that is a separate thing, of course. But just like now we are discussing, so I just thought that let me just touch about that subject also. So that is another area wherein you have to, align your course outcomes with your program outcomes. So all these things are also very important in order to, whenever you are going through this NBA process and all those things. Okay, does anyone else want to discuss? If they want to discuss anything, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, we can just summarize our today's session.
Madam, one more point is there.
Yes.
Generally, PO are defined priorly, and the CO are defined by the faculty members for each and every portion. And PO are defined for see the undergraduate courses. 12 PO are defined by the NBA.
Actually, sir, not all POs are defined by NBA. For example, I don't know about your program, but for example, for ME, for the master's program, 3 POs have already been defined by NBA, and the last 2 POs we have defined.
But if that is PSO, not program specific outcomes,
That is different. That is different. That is PEOs which you are talking about. That is different. But POs, program outcomes.
Madam, PO are program education objective, that is different thing. I am saying about the PO and PSO. 12 PO are defined by NBA, and 2 or 3 or 4 another PO that is called PSO we can define. Like you explained in the webinar. So, despite of the 12 fixed PO, we can go for 3-4 PO that is called program specific outcome. No?
Yeah.
The program outcome is like the graduate attributes. So, for suppose computer science, suppose 12 things are there, and someone is interested to add something. So, for that particular program, he or she can add this things.
Right.
Completion of course within 2 or 3 years. That is objective, that is different.
Yes. Ultimately, as you very rightly said, when you are designing your curriculum, once you have designed your curriculum for each subject, you will be defining your COs. But ultimately, you will have to map your COs with your POs, which are already been defined. Madam.